This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones. Having reached the town of Varfell, and following the discovery that the rebel, Lord Polmir, was beginning to amass forces at a secret location south of the Dragonspire Mountains, Knut took his crew and his ship, the Uvadraka, and left his companions to go in search of Beric's true father, Jarl Einar, in the hope of persuading him to bring a host of Skade warriors to support the loyalist forces in the war to come. After an emotional farewell, the remaining companions headed back to Lord Teuoc's hall to meet the guide that the Thane had promised would lead them up into the mountains. En route, the companions passed through a square, where they observed the construction of a new temple. But as they and a group of bystanders looked on, the huge crane that was being used to hoist the masonry broke, sending some of its load smashing to the ground, injuring some of the onlookers. Panic and chaos ensued, and once the dust had cleared, the companions spotted a supposed workman trying to further sabotage the crane, to make its remaining load fall upon the innocent, not least Lena, who had intervened to save a child from being crushed. Vaylin successfully cast Push against the man, throwing him clear of the crane and preventing him from cutting the hoisting rope. And before he could get to his feet, Beric rushed in to apprehend the saboteur. But who this man is, and who he works for, remains to be seen. Chapter 56, Part 1, Day 58, Afternoon. Party status: Beric, 43 out of 43 hit points. Lena, 31 out of 31 hit points. Vaylin, 19 out of 19 hit points. Talion, 27 out of 27 hit points. Spells available: Vaylin has memorized Shield, Clairvoyance, and Ignite. Talion has memorized Resolve, Poetic Prose, Pitch, Imbue, and Lullaby. Lena can pray for 2 second-level miracles and 1 third-level miracle. All eyes in the mead hall were focused on the man as he stood impassively before Lord Teuoc, his hands bound behind his back, his face smeared with blood and grime. There was nothing distinguishing about the man. He was of average build. His brown hair was cropped short. His features were plain, though his nose had been broken when Beric pushed him against the temple wall. He was altogether unremarkable, perfectly placed to blend in and not stand out. Following the incident at the new temple, a contingent of Teuoc's housecarls quickly arrived at the scene, along with the town's priest, his novitiate, and dozens of other volunteers to attend the victims and clear the rubble. Lena and Vaylin had given aid where they could, while Beric handed the saboteur over to the commander of the housecarls. Now, a few hours later, the companions have finished relaying the events to Varfell's Thane. 3 people had died in the incident, and more than a dozen had been injured. If it had not been for Vaylin's quick thinking, many more would have died. Teuoc had thanked the companions, recognising their service, not just in preventing greater loss of life, but also in apprehending the villain who now stood before him. The Master Mason had been questioned about the man, who revealed that he had joined the construction as a labourer 2 weeks ago. He had said that his name was Locryn, and claimed to be from the nearby village of Trebarthen. The Thane sat back in his ornately carved wooden throne, stroking his long moustache with his left hand.
"Well now, Locryn,"
he addressed the man, his voice calm and unreadable.
"Who is it that pays you?"
The man, Locryn, looked up defiantly and sneered.
"Pasco,"
he replied, giving the name of the master mason. Teuoc scoffed, and getting up from his seat, walked to Locryn until they were eye to eye.
"Play not games with me, villain!"
The Thane spat the final word, though his voice was low, cold, and full of menace.
"Your death is inevitable, but you can make it quick, or you can choose to suffer unspeakable torment."
Locryn stared unflinchingly back at the Thane, then spat in Teuoc's face. The housecarls guarding him moved to strike their prisoner, but Teuoc signalled that they should stay their hands. He wiped the spittle from his face, then cleaned his hand on Locryn's tunic.
"Very well. You have chosen pain."
He nodded to the guards, who began to drag the saboteur away.
"My lord!"
Lena exclaimed by way of interjection, stepping forward. Teuoc raised his hand again to instruct his men to wait.
"Speak, sister."
The cleric moved closer, turning to the prisoner.
"A person may hide their truth, but to the Nine, their conscience is an open book."
Dramatis Personae. One night ago. Valen sat cross-legged on the bed in the room that he shared with Lena. His eyes strained in the soft, flickering candlelight as he studied, but he was completely absorbed in his task. For the past few days, he had felt that he was close to unlocking a crucial breakthrough in his studies, and for some time he had been slowly transcribing the ancient scroll that he had found in the vault of Ilis Gwyn. He took his quill, and dipping it into the ink, dragged it gently across the page in his spellbook, copying the penultimate rune with deliberate care. The companions had secured rooms at the White Wyvern, one of Varfel's numerous waterside inns, and the gentle burble of the river Nade's flow could be heard, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby in the stillness of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, momentarily shattering the tranquility and causing the mage to look towards the window. Lena stood there, gazing into the dark expanse, taking in the cool night air. The light from the waning gibbous moon cast a soft sheen across her pale face and glistened off her golden red hair like embers in the dark. She wore just her linen undertunic, the fabric clinging gently to her form, rippling slightly in a faint breeze. While she stood in profile to him, Valen could see that she was deep in thought, her brow furrowed and her expression troubled. He closed his spellbook and put his things to one side. "Lena?" Valen's voice cut through the quiet, breaking Lena from her reverie. She turned towards him, and he saw then that her eyes were wet and glistening with unshed tears. "What troubles you?" he asked, his voice full of concern. The cleric wiped away the tears, and she gave him a weak, unconvincing smile, her lips trembling.
"It's nothing,"
she replied dismissively, but her voice was faltering, betraying her disquiet. Valen got up from the bed and went to her. He put his hands on her upper arms. Her skin was cold and covered in goosebumps. His hands were warm in contrast, and his touch made her shiver involuntarily.
"You're cold,"
he observed, as she nestled into him as he brought her close to share his warmth. He held her there, saying nothing, as her shivers gradually subsided. He knew she would speak if she wanted to. Eventually she pulled back and fixed his gaze with her own, her eyes soft and searching.
"You won't ever lie to me, will you?"
she asked, her lip quivering as she spoke, her voice desperate in a way that tightened his chest.
"I could not bear it."
Valen knew she had been thinking of her former lover, and he felt a knot twist in his stomach. Lena had told him what had happened back in Godsport, and the mage knew how Merrin's betrayal had shattered her trust. He could understand how an innocent young woman could have been easily exploited by an older man. But all the same, he was jealous. He knew this feeling to be irrational, and felt a sudden pang of guilt for feeling the way he did. The past was not important, he told himself. He loved Lena, and nothing else mattered. He looked at her, earnestly, his voice firm with sincerity.
"I will never lie to you,"
he vowed, his words free from duplicity.
"I promise."
Lena's lips broke into a small smile, as she looked a little embarrassed, her cheeks flushing softly.
"I know you won't,"
she affirmed, then added,
"Forgive me. I trust you, and I know you to be true."
Valen smiled back, his heart warmed by her words, and brushed away a stray lock of hair from her face.
"I believe there is no higher virtue than truth. For when a man lies, he murders some part of the world."
Lena looked at him, with eyes full of admiration and respect. Reaching up, she pulled him towards her, until her lips gently brushed against his. Then stepping back, she smiled, and taking him by the hand, she led him to bed. Off mic, I rolled an opposed test between Lord Teuoc's charisma and Locryn's morale, which resulted in the saboteur resisting the Thane's attempt to extract information. Now, way back in episode 18, Lena used the first level miracle Cause Fear to get answers from the Brethren agent, Redwald. That path is closed to the cleric, given that she has used all of her first level miracles to heal some of the injured. However, she does have access to the more targeted power, Seek Truth. This is a third level homebrew miracle, whereby the cleric asks their deity to compel another person to speak only the truth. The target is not compelled to proffer information, but must answer any questions truthfully. The target may attempt a save versus spell to resist the effect. Lena must roll under her wisdom of 17 for her prayer to be answered. An 8. So far so good, but Locryn can try to resist the effects by making a successful save versus spell. As a 6th level rogue, Locryn needs to roll a 13 or more to succeed. A 5. Okay, so I need to determine which truths the cleric will uncover. Time to ask the Oracle for some answers. Firstly, is Locryn really from the nearby village of Trebartham? A 3. That's a no but. Okay, maybe he has been there. Oh, how about as part of a so-called brigand attack? Is that true? A 5. That's a straight yes. So is he part of Elf Volcano's gang? A 3. That's a no but. Okay, so I'm going to say that Locryn was with some of Cana's men during such an attack, but that he is directly employed by Maelor or even Lord Polmere himself. So the obvious question is whether Locryn is a member of the Brethren. A 2. That's a straight no. Okay, so he is likely to be simply one of Polmere's men, perhaps instructed by Maelor. That would suggest that his purpose was to spread terror in order to demoralise the people of Varfell, and perhaps to reinforce the misdirection to draw Petroc's forces away from supporting the king. I wonder though if Locryn has knowledge of the Brethren and their influence over Lord Polmere. A 3. That's a no but. One more thing then. Does Locryn have any more knowledge about the rebel plans? A 5. That's a straight yes. So I will say that he knows one of 4 possible pieces of useful information. I will randomly roll which he knows. Okay then. Chapter 56, Part 2, Day 58, Afternoon. Party status. The party status is unchanged, except that Lena has used her 3rd level miracle. Lena stood before Locryn, looking directly into his eyes. The saboteur regarded her with dismissive contempt, his lip curled up in a sneer. Holding her holy symbol in her left hand, the cleric reached out and placed her hand upon Locryn's forehead. He tried to shift away, probably to annoy her, rather than out of any genuine concern for what she was about to do. But regardless, the guards strengthened their restraint in response. Lena ignored the attempted disruption, and instead, fixing her gaze, began to intone a prayer.
Mitha,
the cleric said softly,
I beseech thee, hear my prayer.
She lifted her head, and her voice rang out loud and clear.
Giver of wisdom, beacon of truth, hallowed is thy word forsooth. Well of knowledge, giver of sight, thy arrow shoots in truest flight. O blessed sage, counsel our choice, that we may speak with virtuous voice. Deliver us justice, enlighten our hearts, unveil to us the righteous path. Compel the false prophet, let them speak the true word, reveal to thy faithful their truth to be heard. So let it be, now and for eternity.
Lena's final word echoed around the hall as she removed her hand from Locryn's head. She stepped back, now both hands clasped around her holy symbol, humility and reverence written across her face. Locryn snorted in mockery and opened his mouth to speak some derision, but stopped. A look of confusion spread across his face as he found himself unable to utter the words, and a soft, almost imperceptible blue aura began to emanate around his body. There were gasps and murmurs from Teuoc and his men, for all had never or rarely seen such a manifest demonstration of the Nine's existence. Without a trace of hubris, Lena held the man's gaze.
You will speak no false words,
she commanded with authority. The muscles in Locryn's neck were taut as he tried to fight the power which now controlled him.
Yes.
Where do you hail from?
The cleric asked.
Hornis,
Locryn responded through gritted teeth.
That's in Polmere's lands,
Teuoc observed. Lena gave a slight nod to acknowledge the Thane, but kept her eyes fixed on the man before her.
Whom do you serve?
Locryn's face reddened, and the vein in his forehead became prominent as he desperately tried to resist speaking.
Lord Polmere.
He spat, unable to stop himself from revealing his master. Then gasped from having held his breath. The cleric waited for a few moments for the saboteur to compose himself, and when he looked back at her, he did so with daggers. Lena's face was impassive, holding herself with quiet dignity. Eventually, she questioned again.
Why did you sabotage the crane?
I was ordered to spread terror, to break the will of the people.
This time, Locryn did not try to resist, and even snorted with the irony that it was his own will that had been broken by the woman before him.
For what purpose?
To pressure Lord Teuoc to accept my lord's offer.
Lena decided to change tack.
Why has Lord Polmir aligned himself with the Brethren of the Purifying Light?
Locryn looked confused.
I know not of what you speak.
The cleric had no choice but to be satisfied with this answer.
Very well. Then tell me this. What do you know of Polmir's plans to move against the king?
Locryn's eyes widened with the realization that he was about to betray his lord, and his horrified expression remained fixed as he replied.
My lord and his allies will gather their forces at Kieromorthal over the next few weeks. They plan to cross the Dragon's Tooth Pass on the first day of Havua.
Content that the man had no further secrets to reveal, Lena let go of her holy symbol, and the aura surrounding Locryn's body slowly receded. His shoulders slumped in defeat, for not only was his life forfeit, but he had revealed his lord's plans.
Take this villain to the Temple Square,
Teuoc commanded abruptly, getting up from his throne.
Hang him there. My people shall see that justice is served, and after, display his body outside the west gate.
He walked over to where Locryn was standing, a now pathetic and diminished sight. The Thane leaned in close.
You shall be a feast for the crows.
Teuoc nodded at the guards, who dragged the protesting saboteur away. The Thane turned to look at the companions, his face dark.
Havua is in little more than 30 days.
Then we must pray that Canute finds Einar, and soon.
Beric said in response.
We will need all the help we can get.
With the scale of the wider events at play, for some time I have kept a calendar of events to help keep track of everything. This includes the movements and plans of the various antagonists in the emerging narrative, as well as things like the lunar cycle and significant events for the companions. As we have just heard, the rebels plan to cross the Dragonspine Mountains via the Dragon's Tooth Pass on the first day of Havua, which in Power and More is the equivalent of the month of August. Incidentally, the name Havua is derived from the Cornish words for summer and gold, reflecting the colour of the wheat at this time of the year. This move by the rebels will be a crossing the Rubicon moment in the stability of the kingdom, in which Lord Polmir's rhetoric of declaring against the king becomes an act of open revolt and insurrection. This date is just 35 days away, meaning that the companions are now in a race against time not only to prevent Reynard of Harburg from acquiring all 5 Hellstones, but also, in the case of Canute, to find and persuade Einar to join the fight for the Loyalist cause. Of course, armies move slowly, so if the rebels' intention is to march on Travans, some 100 miles from Kieromorthal and over difficult terrain, then any confrontation could be 7 to 14 days later. While all of that is potentially in the future, it does set the context for what the companions must do, and how quickly they must do it. Back to the matter at hand though, and it's time to introduce the man who will serve as the companions' guide into the mountains. Back in episode 54, a roll on the Oracle told me that Teuoc, or someone else in the town, has some knowledge of the mage Demelza, and I think that person will be their guide. To determine what they know, I'm going to roll on the mythic event meaning chart for a prompt. Action first. 48. Block. Now the subject. 93. Weather. Well, that seems pretty straightforward. Right then, let's get back to the narrative. Chapter 56. Part 3. Day 58. Evening. Party status. The party status is unchanged. The atmosphere in Lord Teuoc's mead hall was subdued, as the men of his household troops ate at the two long, worn tables. What talk could be heard were low murmurs, tinged with unease, and there was little in the way of cheer. The room was thick with the rich scent of roasted meat, and a board turned slowly on a great spit over the crackling hearth at the hall's centre, its skin turning golden brown as the fire hissed with every drop of fat that fell into the flames, sending small bursts of embers into the air. Word of the saboteur had swiftly spread through the hall, and with it, despite Teuoc's reassurances, whispers that Varfel may soon become the target of rebel aggression, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The Thane had invited the companions to dine with him, and they had been given the honour of sitting at his high table, alongside his wife, Lady Aneth, who sat gracefully beside her husband. She was a small, demure woman, whose fair hair was neatly plaited beneath a simple wimple, the delicate fabric framing her soft face. Her dress, though of good quality, was modest, and her quiet demeanour, paired with her humble appearance, made her seem more like a nun than a noblewoman. She said little, though she had shown a genuine interest when speaking with Lena. Yet there was a palpable sense of distress about her, as though the events earlier in the day had unsettled her deeply. When all had eaten their fill, Teuoc invited Talion to entertain his men. The bard recounted the events at Kerodu, shaping them into an epic poem, which he called The Fall of the Serpent Queen. While his companions recognised the tale, the bard had greatly embellished it, casting Naedra as a far more monstrous and seemingly invincible foe, and elevating their own deeds, except of course his own, which were omitted entirely, into actions like those of legendary heroes. While Talion's performance embarrassed his friends, it had the desired effect. When he had finished, the assembled company clapped and cheered, their spirits lifting, the grim prospect of war fading into the distance, replaced by the promise of honour, valour, and renown. Eventually, the tables were cleared. Lady Aneth retired to her bedchamber, and Teuoc dismissed his men, who filed out one by one, until only a single man remained seated on the bench. The Thane beckoned the man over, who rose from his seat and approached with a slow, deliberate gait. He was older, perhaps in his late 30s, with shaggy brown hair that hung to his jaw, and a beard streaked with the first signs of grey. His skin was weathered, tanned by years of exposure to the elements, and his blue eyes, though sharp, were framed with the deep lines of a man who had spent much of his life squinting against the sun.
This is Hedrick.
The Thane introduced the man, who gave a nod towards the companions.
No one knows the mountains better than he.
Thank you, Lord.
Hedrick's voice was low, gruff, and heavily accented. He turned to address the companions directly.
My lord tells me you wish to go to Pen Malkine.
Aye, Berg confirmed, his eyes studying the mountain man, assessing him. Do you know it?
I do. Should take 3 days, all being well.
The mountain man replied, his tone heavy with the experience of 1,000 such journeys, then added,
But the mountains can be a cruel mistress, even in the summer. You'll need to be prepared.
He fixed a hard, penetrating gaze upon the companions, as if sizing them up for the hardships ahead.
What's your business in the mountains anyhow?
Beric glanced at his companions, torn between caution and the knowledge that they could not hide their purpose for long in the company of a man like Hedrick.
We're seeking a woman by the name of Demelza. We believe she passed through Barfell a few months ago before travelling on to Penmalkin. We understand she may have another woman with her.
Hedrick's eyes narrowed slightly, and a flicker of recognition passed across his face, along with something darker, something guarded.
Aye, they passed through here alright. Probably 3 months since.
He shifted his gaze between Teuoc and the companions before continuing, his voice low and cautious.
They hired a man, Locryn, to take him up into the mountains. As good a guide as any.
Hedrick's face was grim.
But 2 days after they left, a late storm blew in, and Locryn never came back.
Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you like what you've heard, then please consider rating and reviewing the show in your podcatcher of choice. Not only do I love seeing the feedback, but it really does help the show reach new listeners. As always, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? A newcomer to the show, playing Locryn, is AJ. AJ is the GM of Pretending with Dice, a TTRPG actual play delivered in an audio drama style. And returning to the show, playing the role of Teuoc, is Carl White. Carl is the host of the excellent Lone Adventurer podcast, which is firmly on my list of favourite listens. My sincere thanks to both of you. I'm incredibly grateful. I'll put these wonderful folks' links in the show notes. You can also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. If you are interested, I also have a range of merchandise, which can be found at www.redbubble.com/people/legendbones/shop. To keep the cost down to you, all items are presented at zero markup. I make no money from them. It's purely to give something back to fans of the show. I'd also love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones at TTRPG-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone.
What kind of story do you want to hear today? How about the tale of a trio of travellers making their way through a fantasy realm full of mysteries? What about the chronicles of a seemingly cursed English town through the ages, home to eldritch horrors, extra-dimensional goo, and maybe some fish people that live down by the harbour? Perhaps you want to run in the shadows, explore the final frontier, or lose yourself in a galaxy far, far away. On Pretending with Dice, we're on a voyage through all kinds of tabletop RPGs, bringing our games, characters and stories to life in an audio drama-like style, complete with original music, sound effects, and gripping storylines featuring a rotating cast of amazing role players. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts, or head to pretendingwithdice.com for our direct feeds, and much, much more. Come find a new story today on Pretending with Dice.